Okay, so if you want to set up an automated watering system, there are two options that you can use. One is for container gardening, individual containers, and you can do that with a drip irrigation system, and it could go as far as you'd like for it to go. And all you really need for that is a half-inch tubing, quarter-inch tubing. These little guys they call T's, which basically connects the main hose, the main tubing, to your individual drip containers. And aside from all of that, you would just need similar things that you would if you were to do a soaker hose system, and that, except without the tubings and the little parts, you will now be using a soaker hose, which is just a long hose that emits and squirts out water overall for the entirety of the hose, so you can cover a huge planter bed with that rather than individual containers. And you can still do drip systems for a large bed if you have your plants all spaced out and even, but if you have a bed similar to mine where there's a ton of just stuff to save room, then you can use the soaker hose system. For the soaker hose system, the things that you'll need would be an automatic timer. I like this one because it's super simple. A splitter, depending on how many beds or different areas you want to lead water to. You can even extend the amount of beds that you can water by attaching additional splitters. But ideally with 4 you should be fine. And you would also need a hose that would connect to your soaker hose, so that your soaker hose is not connected right here by the main source and have it all water drip down on the ground where it's not needed. So you can get for yourself a regular hose, which I have 2 of, or a lead-in hose, which is a shorter version, and this is good for any bed that's close. This guy is not long enough to reach my raised bed, so we're just using this. We've attached a nozzle to it so that we can use as a normal hose, so that we don't disrupt our system as we get water to manually do other things. So besides your timer, your splitter, your soaker hose, and your regular hose, if you have water leading to a bed that's far away or to a long line of beds, you would need a pressure regulator to make sure that the water gets pushed all the way to the end, to the last bed. That's really important. And we have here the hose that we're using for one of our beds. It's coiled up here because it doesn't need to be extended too far. And so you always want to put the initial start or the beginning of the water flow on the highest bed so that it could flow along gravity. It would not work well if you start with a lower bed and try to lead your soaker hose up to the higher bed. It's working against gravity and it's very difficult. So you can see that the hose that I have, I wanted to start it on this side because I wanted the end to eventually end up on the other side where the tomato plant will be, and then we'll then connect it to all these guys all the way to the strawberry beds. So all you have to do is connect your hose to your soaker hose, very easy, and then arrange your soaker hose however you'd like. On this bed I did it more of like a zigzag and wanted to make sure that all of the vegetation gets covered. Sometimes if I have areas that don't have anything there. I don't want to waste water, so I would actually move something, that is away from the water source to where the soaker hose is, because we don't want to run these for too long. They drench the whole bed and the water will get released on the bottom, so that the plants don't get drowned. But that is also a waste of water when water drip out of the bottom. So sometimes we would put pots underneath to catch any water, but for the most part we want to run the system for 5 minutes or less, so that way it doesn't waste water, and on top of that you get the water to the source most efficiently. So normally I would move other plants here to make sure that the water drips out and covered, but I actually just seeded this with new seeds, so I'm gonna make sure and not plant anything on top. Let me show you how the hose gets wrapped. I want my strawberries to get the most water, so I try to put the water source closest to there. And then like my peas and beans, or beans specifically, can get overwatered really quickly, so if I don't need to wrap around them, I'll just pass by them with the hose. But here we have it going onto the tomato pot, so that that transfer from the big bed to the second bed, there's no leak or waste of water. It's caught right there with the tomato plant. And then I continue this hose. I think this is a 50 feet one, so it's enough to cover at least 3 beds that are close by. And so this guy got got led over to here, and we also have small plants, individual plants here, to catch the rest of the soaker hose that's not on the bed, the water from it. And so here's the strawberry patch, same way, zigzag. And we want to make sure, and then we don't have a plant here, but we did before. I'm going to put one there so we don't waste any water. And another way that you can wrap your hose is in a spiral, which I think is the best way, but that usually works well if you have more of a circular bed, or your plants are planted that strategically in that way. And then at the end of the line for this guy, we cap it, which is a cap that comes with the soaker hose itself. So capping it will make sure that no water will escape except through the soaker hose itself. I have a second hose here leading underneath my tall bed all the way out to the very last bed here. And I can connect it either way. I can connect it from this corner, or I can connect it from this corner. And since this hose is so long, I wanted to get it for future use. I didn't want the coil to be on the walkable side of the property. I put it here closer to the fence line where we're not growing anything. We're just throwing, random seeds here, and also any plants that have disease that we don't want in the ground here, because the ground soil here is already bad anyways. So we're just gonna use it for vegetation, but we're not gonna eat any of the stuff that grows here. Anyways, going back to the secondary hose that we're connecting to a bed with a soaker hose, same thing. You would connect it very easily to the end of the hose, and then you would organize the soaker hose in a way that would work best for your bed. I had to move vegetations around quite a bit for this guy, just because I planted them all in a straight row, and then I found out that it's really hard to do a zigzag with straight lines, because those straight lines will end up making your loop pinch and so the water flow is not going to be as even, possibly would stop on some of the days. So I wanted to make sure that the loop part, it's really fat, and then the line parts curve so that it can accommodate the loops. So that's how I'm doing my second bed. And the reason why I had to connect it to its own hose from all the way over there is because if I continue it, if I connect a shorter soaker hose on my last bed here with the longer soaker hose that ran through all 3 of the other beds, even with the pressure regulator, the water doesn't make it all the way to the end. And so the last guy here was dried and never got watered efficiently. So I ended up getting a different hose and connecting it by itself. And I didn't need a pressure regulator for this one because I was only using one soaker hose. It wasn't a long ass soaker hose that had to like reach all the way to the end. So, and regular hoses are really durable in terms of leading water to any destination. It's long for a reason. So as long as the water doesn't have to pump through a long soaker hose or multiple soaker hose, it should work just fine without a pressure regulator. So similar to the other one, I capped it so that all of the water that gets released are from this guy. So now that I've shown you all the different parts and how they're connected, I'm gonna turn it on so that you can see how it works. I have my timer scheduled, but what I'll do to show this test is I will do a manual run, and I'll do it for 1 minute. And so when that starts, you can actually hear it open. And this faucet here is open, so if I wanted to use this guy, I can here because he's turned on. But right now I don't need it to run there. I need him to turn off. So I'm going to turn on my dripper. I'm going to turn on my 2 soaker hose. And so I should actually do this for longer so you can see, but you will see here that water will begin to squirt out through this soaker hose. So here you'll see it's a slow start, but you can kind of see it. This means that the hose is pinched somewhere, so I'll have to come back and review it. But I wanted to show you how it's reached the other bed as well. So you can see that it's dripping. So I ran it for such a short period of time. It was only 1 minute, so I'll do it again. So I'm running it manually for 1 minute again to show you. Both of these soaker hoses are on. Oops. Both of these soaker hoses are on here. The water source for the hose is off. The dripper's off because we just want to examine right now the soaker hoses and how it works in the bed. Ooh, the water is really hot right now, so you know, I try to usually set the timer to water the plants either early in the morning or early in the evening. So, but you can see here that the water is soaking from the hosing. So soaker hose, lots of water, very efficient. You can see the water dripping out. And then over here as well, these guys are getting watered really well. Make sure that the drippage from the hose connecting to the soaker hose is inside a bed so you don't waste it. Here are the other guys. See how he drips here? We need to find something to put there. The soaker hose seems pretty weak for this last bed here, but that's only because it was on for a minute. If it was on for 5 minutes, then these guys would get sufficient water. So that was way too short for these guys, but you can kind of see still that it's wet wherever the soaker hose is.